You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Presented by Bet365, excuse me. It's time for the Tuesday edition of Leafs Morning Take. I nailed that off the top. Nick Alberga joined alongside guest host Dave Pagnotta, the fourth period NHL Network. What's going on, Dave?
How we doing, buddy? Long time no see.
Yeah, like literally last night at the Leafs game. I should mention as well, open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Just solid game. Well, decent game last night, I should say. We took that one in, but yeah, doing well. Busy week for the Leafs. Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
I will say it's one of those games that they don't usually win. They don't play well against inferior opponents, so I'll definitely take it. But I'm still raveled over last night and the video tributes for Tyler Bertuzzi and TJ Brodie. Not a dry eye in that building, man. You saw it.
Not tributes. They're welcome back acknowledgments. They're thank you for doing what you did. Bertuzzi afterwards. At the end of the game, he was down below, and him and a bunch of his now former teammates were like, shooting the shit and having a good time, and everybody was all about it. So they got, they're still buddies. They got some love for each other still off the ice, but just a little recognition. Hey, thanks for playing half a season for us, for Bertuzzi, and TJ did some decent things on the back end for a little stretch.
I always love the tummy sticks, and in Bertuzzi's sort of stance, like it was funny watching the welcome back tribute, whatever you want to call it, on the board there. Bertuzzi looked up and he sort of like wiggled. Yeah, it was like, oh, they're acknowledging me. I played like 17 games for this team. Like we need a summit on this thing. We got to draw a line to like how many games to have.
You hate them. Tribute. You definitely hate them. I mean, look, if you're playing one season, relax. If you're there for a stretch, okay, fine. It's fine to acknowledge them. But again, it's a welcome back. I like the welcome back more than I do like the, official tributes where, you get the emotional music and the fans don't really know what the hell's going on. And they're like, oh yeah, he played here. Congrats. It's been a while. I don't know, whatever. They're trying to spice things up. I think they need anything to enhance. And I know you and Rosie talk about this a lot. Anything to enhance the in-game atmosphere at Scotiabank Arena is fine by me because it needs it.
It was certainly enhanced last night. No, I didn't really feel that way. But I think you're right. I do think they've sort of toned it back, believe it or not. Like they just have these welcome back things where I think even dating back a couple of years ago, there was like full-fledged videos. So at least the crew has brought things back a bit, and it's just a quick acknowledgement, and then you move on. I get that, but I just think, like, where do you draw the line where like a Pierre Engvall is getting a tribute? It's insane to me.
It's an interesting kind of thought process as to why they do this on a regular basis. I mean, thankfully it's just one appearance, their first appearance, and then that's the end of it. But I don't know. And it's always what I love the most is it's always during the TV timeout. So you don't even have it as part of the broadcast. So it's just for the people in the building. It's like a semi-acknowledgement. It's like, okay, we'll keep everyone happy. You get to see your tribute, but the rest of the fan base doesn't give a rat's ass. So we don't really need to put this on TV.
It's a nice gift for spending $400 to go to a hocky game around there. You get to see a nice little welcome back tribute done on Canva, probably on the screen, saying welcome back TJ Brodie and
hey man,
Tyler Bertuzzi. So there you go.
They're renovating. They're still renovating the first bowl. So like they need that money. They need to allocate the funds because they're strapped for it. So you got to allocate the funds to redo the 100 level.
Fair enough. I've heard some reports as well. The game was on Prime, which we're going to get to again, and it sounded like it was louder again on TV. But you and I were in the building. Didn't sound any different to me, at least. For you?
I think it was a little bit better than some previous games. There was another Monday. I can't remember the opponent, but there was another Monday on Prime, and that was loud. That was like I think it was the first game for Prime. At least for the Leafs, and that one was a loud game. Mm-hmm. Last night was decent. I don't think it was that extravagant. I don't think it was that crazy, but as we know, it has a tendency, especially in the first half of the year, to be a little more reserved, I guess, at Scotiabank Arena. So if they can enhance it a little bit, great. It was also like a next gen game, so allegedly there were more kids and whatnot in the building, so maybe that kind of hyped things to a certain extent. But I don't know. Leafs are, I don't know, the in-game atmosphere, the in-game entertainment value in that rink, always a big question mark for me. I know they're trying, but was it Bart Simpson who says trying is the first step towards failure? Well, I just do.
Yeah. I'll take your word for it. But bottom line, the Leafs won the game. That's all that really matters in my mind. Davis Prince writes in, Nick, saw you at the game last night, but didn't want to bug you. Mind if I buy you a beer next time? I'll never say no to a $45 beer.
Yeah. Why not? Take it back. Just like avoid everyone in the press box when you jump back in, just so no one one gets the odors off you.
It's probably a bad look. You're right. Well, if you're looking to cop some Nation gear and support the podcast, now is a good time. Everything's 15% off this week. And if you spend over $200, we'll even throw in free shipping. Need the perfect gift for your favorite fan? Nation Gear has you covered, from hoodies to hats. Make this holiday season legendary for the hockey lover in your life. The brand new My City collection has dropped. They're looking great, by the way. Head on over to nationgear.ca and shop now. Big question before we get going here. When do you typically start your holiday shopping, DP?
I should have started already. I have not. I tell myself end of November, get that shit out of the way and start get a few people out of the way. No, I'm very late on it. Or I don't know about very late. I'm just late. And I can't do it this week because the Leafs are playing all week, so I'll be there. But I think next week I'll have to try to bang it out as quick as I can, because the last minute crap just drives me nuts. And when are you going to go hit the mall? At 7, 8 o'clock? You got to start throwing elbows and right hooks and hip checking people to try to, just get into one of the stores. So it's dangerous out there sometimes. What about you? Do you bang it out of the way, or do you do the online shopping?
Yeah, I'm more of an online shopper. I do think December 25th is creeping up on us. Next thing you know, it's 22 days away. I took care of my niece. Her birthday is in December as well, so I just 2-for-1 special there. I love to do that. But yeah, it creeps up on you, and it's one of those things where just one night I sit down, order a bunch of things, and just pray to God it shows up before December 25th. Because if you don't use Amazon, stuff like that, there's who knows what's going to happen. And on top of that, Canada Post is on strike now here in Canada. Yeah,
that's a pain in the ass. So I mean, if you're doing the Amazons or whatever that using, you've got that service. I don't know, it always makes me nervous. If I don't pull that crap off by now, then I'm sweating. So I rather just go deal with the crowds and try to find take a morning off, fake the call in sick and whatnot, and just be all right, I got 2 hours. You guys are getting whatever the hell I can find.
Very smart. Very smart. We're helping you out here on Leafs Morning Take In. That's Dave Pagnotta. I'm Nick Alberga. The Tuesday edition. Get those super chats in, especially here with Dave being an insider and all. If you've got any questions from the trade market, anything Maple Leafs perspective, get it in the chat. I'll get it up to Dave here at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. So yet another victory for the Maple Leafs, a 4-1 win over Chicago. They've won 9 of 11. And the thing I've been highlighting for the majority of the season is the home ice record. They've won 11 of 14 at Scotiabank Arena. So everything we just said about that barn being quiet, they continually keep winning there, which is great to see.
Puts the other team to sleep. So, they're not used to it. They're not giving their all. The Leafs, the better they play at home, obviously is good for the club, and it builds up your confidence a little bit. And it makes it a more difficult, obviously, a place to play. And that tends to that message tends to resonate. So other teams are now cognizant of that as they're going in. And maybe they're trying to do a little bit too much to kind of get a lead early and to take the Leafs off their game. And Chicago's going through the motions. They're typically, obviously they're going through their rebuild still, the motions of the rebuild. For the most part this season, they've been tight in games. They're losing them, but they've been competitive, and it hasn't been just getting their asses kicked on a regular basis. They're in a lot of their contests. they're not winning. So from their perspective, great. You want to see that because you want to see some of these other kids develop. Reichel scored yesterday, got the lone one for him. But, if you're the Leafs, you want to keep building off that and have that reputation of being tough at home because it kind of plays mind tricks to a certain extent with some of the visitors. So hopefully that translates in April and on. But, for now, you take it and you build your confidence up as you now sit atop the Atlantic.
I think in general it was a fascinating game because I thought the Leafs had a really good first period. I thought Chicago was all over them in the second period. Some penalties were taken. In the third period,
Yeah.
they put their foot down even after it was a 2-1 game, like a quick response, which you love to see. But ultimately, to the point I was making earlier on, you never really knew what you were going to expect for the Maple Leafs against an inferior opponent. And early on, I'm like, Arvid Soderblom, here he goes again. He's going to save everything. He's going to make 40 saves, get the shutout for Chicago. But they kept chipping away. Skill took over in the game. And I'll be quite honest, like I really did not notice Connor Bedard, which maybe is more indicative of what they have around Bedard in Chicago. Outside of him, I know Seth Jones is not in the lineup right now. Korchinski's in the American Hockey League. Like this team is far off from anything substantial. That's why some of the signings raise my eyebrows a bit in terms of what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think they wanted to insulate Bedard and some of the younger kids with veteran presence, and that's why you brought in Bertuzzi and you brought in Teravainen up front, and you wanted to add a little bit of extra to it so the compete level would increase. The Leafs talked about this. Austin talked about it at the end of the game. Stolarz talked about it at the end of the game as well. They're really, really confident in their PK, and if they're taking a penalty, if it's a smart penalty, good, take it, because your penalty kill has been so solid of late. You take that chance, and if you're gonna hold or hook or do whatever to prevent a scoring chance for Chicago or for whoever the hell they're playing, you pull that off because your PK is doing so well. You take that chance. I like that kind of mindset too. If you're taking those smart penalties, let your bread and butter right now, which is your PK, kind of do some work for a couple minutes. And the goaltending has been solid. So, I know the second period, it wasn't their best, wasn't their sharpest, and Berube was very acknowledging of that. But whatever. Take the penalties, kill them, come out with the W, and that's kind of what they did. Towards the second half of that game.
It's been really interesting the way the PK has really elevated this season, and obviously Lane Lambert's a big reason why that's been the case. Some of the additions, the goaltending, as you mentioned, all coming together, and that's why Toronto's PK has been so strong here early in the season. SEO Sanganum writes in, thank you so much for the super chat. The thing about popular Original Six and Canadian hockey markets is that the fan bases are there for the hockey. Only franchises that have arenas that aren't full rely on cheap gimmicks to fill seats. Understood on that front. Getting back to the conversation about the PK.
It's a good point.
It is a good point, but more so like the PK conversation, like who deserves the most credit in your opinion for all this? Because I think Lane Lambert deserves a bit. The goaltending, as you referenced, like Stoli was incredible again last night against Chicago, but I just think everybody is slotted in the right position. They're playing as one cohesive unit right now.
Yeah, and it's recognizing that you've got talent that can excel on the PK, and then exploiting that talent in the right way. And that's, I think, what Lane's been able to do with some of their guys. A lot of these guys don't get enough credit for how strong they can be defensively, especially on more so than anything, the forwards. So, when you talk to some people around the league over the last couple of years and you go, well, Austin's actually a really good two-way kind of player. And people in other markets are going, yeah, okay. Yeah, relax. No, you're there all the time. So you've got the beer goggles on. And like, no, actually, he's a legit, like, he plays well defensively. So if you can utilize that, why wouldn't you? Just because he's your primary goal scorer, who cares? If he can shut things down defensively, throw him out there. Same with Mitch. Same with some of the other guys on this club. Even the role guys that excel better on the PK than they would 5-on-5. So if you're able to take advantage of that and pinpoint the right guys in the right situations, because obviously it's situational based on your opponent, Lambert and the staff there have done a really good job in recognizing that and finding the right pieces. And again, like you said, like we talked about, it helps when Joe and when Stolarz are playing well, playing at this level. And Stolarz, for the time being, I mean, he's been lights out lately. So I think somebody asked him in the postgame as well about if he's thought at all about Four Nations. and being, you know, potential candidate for it. He kind of brushed it off like, now there's other goalies that are way better. But the fact that even that's part of the discussion, that kind of shows you how well he's actually performed this season. And too bad he's not Canadian, because Canada's goaltender's decent, but you know, they could use a little bump.
Yeah, I've been lobbying for Carey Price to come out of retirement and maybe be the starting goalie for Canada, because I don't know who the guy's going to be. But you're so right on Stolarz. Like 27 saves again, especially in the second period. I thought he was tremendous. 8-4-2 now in the season, 2.23, 924, one shutout. I think most importantly, the one thing that has been a theme, you know, in being there for some of the games is how these guys actually really like each other. Like sometimes you get
Yeah.
goaltenders where it just doesn't, you don't really see that sort of bond. We saw it in Boston with like a Swayman and Allmark, and you know, slowly but surely, it feels like these guys genuinely like each other, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, at 100%. And especially when you understand the role / position you're in. Like these guys are going to go back and forth, and they're going to want to do well, right? Like they're going to want to do well, but they're going to want the team to do well too. I just don't want to go out there like the competitive nature of these athletes. I want to do well, but I want to win, and I want my team to win. And if I can contribute in whatever fashion, awesome, cool. These guys have a great relationship. A number of people have talked about it, you know, off the ice as well. So that's what you want when you've got those. Same in a situation. If Stolarz was the clear-cut number one guy and Wall was the backup, or vice versa, it doesn't really matter. If you're understanding that role, it's easy to make the relationship work. And for these guys, you know, competitive nature, competitive guys, they want to play, and it's working for them.
How about Fraser Minten? I think this is an interesting name to watch throughout the season. Of course, we're going to talk some trades later on here in the show, but like Minten has been so reliable. Craig Berube in the post game, we were there, was just gushing over this guy, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
I just think he's like a quiet player. He's not a flashy guy, but always in the right spots. He scores again, 2 goals and 4 points in 5 games. Do you feel like he has staying power? Because I think if he continues to play this way, gets in the good graces of his head coach, I don't think he's going anywhere right now.
I agree with you, and this is why his name was popping up in trade speculation last year, because so many teams were kind of pinpointing this kid as a legitimate NHL threat that they could utilize. So kudos to Toronto for hanging tough, and you know, Tree was like, no, I'm not even considering it at the moment. Him, Cal, and a couple others, but you know, the way that he's playing, he's already like Berube said in the post game, something along the lines of he's a young kid, but he's got a veteran attitude to him. And you know, he goes out there, he plays his game, he's professional about it. Like I give him a lot of credit, for Minten a lot of credit for maintaining that. And he's earning his ice time, and he's going to, I think, as the season progresses, if he continues this pace of play, he's going to get more opportunities to do more things and maybe bump up in the lineup depending on obviously how things shape up. But you're right, Nick. I think Minten is in a position where if he keeps this up, I mean, he's locking in to a full-time role, and that just gives Toronto more depth and more options as the season progresses.
I don't know about you, but when Max Domi returns, I would be shocked if he doesn't go back to the wing and they just stick with Matthews, Tavares, Minten up the middle.
Yeah, I mean, for now, why not? I think we can all agree Max is stronger on the wing than at the dot, so, or up the middle, I should say, rather than actual faceoffs. But this is a good problem to have, and I know we're going to talk about it later on for some trade talk. And I think that's an area they would like to eventually address at some point. But yeah, Max comes back, you throw him on the wing, you keep Minten where he is, and you just kind of deepen it's quality depth that kind of adds to this roster. And if some of the guys that have been around in the league a little bit longer lose their position, again, so be it. You know, you've got the goal here is to win, regardless of, you know, favoritism. So if Minten is pushing that, I mean, I think he's going to build himself into a fan favorite too.
I like it. Again, for his age, he is extremely reliable. I mean,
Yeah.
it is one game, but again, the fact that his head coach is like a tough-nosed coach was like really gushing over him just suggests that he's not going anywhere. Of course, his team is getting healthier, which is great to see, but wise beyond his years is Fraser Minten. And I think to his point and to his opportunity, that role is there for him. Like we've been talking about this all season, this need, this desire for a center, but I wonder if at the end of the day, it comes internally, you know?
From a bottom six side of things, it may. Like, they may no longer need to look for somebody to kind of fill a void potentially on a third or fourth line if you have Minten playing at this level. And you talked about it. He's a smart player too. It's, you know, that when you've got a young guy with a veteran attitude, what the reference there is he's a smart player, and he put himself into position for his goal. You know, Timmins did a great job in you know, the bank shot, fake shot, bank shot, but Minten kind of knew where the opportunity was going to be, and he cashed in on it. So you've got a smart young player. He's filling a void on a team that was eventually, I mean, they started kind of poking around to see what their options are, but you kind of look to see, well, wait a second, we don't have to go pay a price for anybody. We've got this kid in this lineup and he's playing at this level. Perfect. Awesome. Now we can focus on other areas because we've got lines 3 and 4 kind of solidified for later on in the season. So he keeps it up. He's going to continue to earn the minutes, and he's going to kind of solidify his position there in the top 12.
Honestly, it's been great to see again with a cap team like the Maple Leafs. Anytime you can get sort of production and value from guys like Fraser Minten, I think you're laughing. You're in a good spot. Phil Myers plays his second game as a Leaf last night. I really did notice him. Played, got an assist, was a +2, 4 shots on goal. You could tell they're telling him what they want to see from him. He had 7 hits in that game, so they want guys who are big, physical, and that's what Myers brings to the table. We were even talking about this yesterday, how for the first time in a while, the Leafs actually possess depth on the blue line, where it's like decent guys are on the outside looking in, which is great to see, right?
Quality depth, even on the back end. You're right, and that's what Berube was talking about after the game as well, was how much that Myers brought physicality to the game. And I mean, right at the end of it, he was at the final whistle. He was in a scrum wrestling on the ground with whoever it was. And they were just kind of like, all right, we're done. Game's over. But he's, you want that intensity, you want that energy. And if that's what you're looking for, then perfect, bring it. They brought in Hakanpää for a reason, to throw the body around and to be a physical presence on the back end. He's hurt again. So let's see what Myers can do. And yeah, second game in, he did basically everything they asked of him to do. So, it bodes well for the team overall from a depth side of things, and it bodes well for him, knowing that A, not only can I keep up and do what they're asking me, but B, I can stick around with this group for the duration of the season. Paycheck's a little better, and you get to kind of stick in that vibe. So when you get you're interchanging in and out of the roster. When you get instilled into that roster, it's almost like you're not really missing much of a beat.
Especially with the uncertainty surrounding Yanni Hakanpää. It's really got that Klingberg feel, man. Like, Klingberg played, 14, 15 games in Maple Leaf, and now, like, Hakanpää, the knee situation, the Leafs have played, 24 games? This guy's played twice. What's your read on what's going down with Hakanpää? Because I think we've learned time and time again with the Maple Leafs, everything they say when it comes to injuries, take with a grain of salt. Craig Berube a week ago was talking about how he just liked his lineup a bit better with Timmins and others in than Hakanpää, and then a week later, he lands on IR. So they call it knee management or something like that. It's like, what's going on here?
I think their depth allows them the luxury of doing that, right? Like, you don't have to rush anybody back. So you can slot in this guy or that guy, and in this case, last night was Myers, to do more or less what you want Hakanpää to do. So if Myers can do it, and Hakanpää's better, but if Myers can do it, perfect. He can hold the fort down, and this guy can properly heal rather than rush. And I'm not saying rush in a sense of he's coming back a month before he should, but if he needs that extra week, it's not dire straits. You don't have to rush him from that side of things. Let the other guys handle it. They knew from the get-go that this was going to be an interesting situation with Hakanpää health-wise. They originally had the 2-year deal. Then they brought it back to a 1-year. It's not a huge cap hit. So you take a bit of a chance to see if he can be healthy for the long haul. And I think more so Hakanpää's abilities are going to excel more down the stretch, towards second half of March and going into April and postseason wise. So if he's only playing, let's say, 30 games during the regular season, who cares? Make sure he's healthy enough for the stretch run and the postseason. That's where he can excel, because that's what the game demands come 83 and on. So you got the guys to hold the fort down. Make sure he's as healthy as he possibly can be. Obviously, he's going to need to get reps in. But this is a situation that they don't have to rush, and that's a good luxury to have.
Fair enough. I just, in the 2 games I saw Hakanpää, he looked like a really rusty guy who hadn't played in a long time and couldn't keep up with a faster type team in the Maple Leafs. Although they play that grinding style, he made a
Yeah,
bunch of mistakes. Like, he just didn't seem ready, and then it's alarming. And again, I have to credit Benoit. Benoit comes into the lineup. I think he's been excellent
another one.
since coming back after missing a couple games as a health bomb. And maybe there's just not a
Yeah,
fit for Hakanpää right now. But I think you make a great point. I feel better knowing it was a 1-year contract and not a 2-year deal as originally put out there on July 1, right? So I think if it doesn't work out, you can just bury it and move on,
right.
honestly.
You kind of wash your hands and that's it.
Yeah.
But again, because you've got Myers, because you've got Benoit, like the way that I would look at Hakanpää right now is a trade deadline acquisition. So think of him as that type of player. If he can get some reps in early, consistent, in and out of the lineup, cool. But the reason you're bringing that caliber player in is to have additional strength and depth come the postseason.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And I still wonder, like, every good, strong team in the postseason, they have serious depth on the blue line. A lot can change over the next couple months, but I wouldn't be shocked if they still added one more guy, a guy who can filter in and out. And obviously, we'll see what happens with some different
Yeah.
guys in the blue line, but you never have enough depth in the blue line, right?
No, and that's why when they had before they traded Liljegren, whatever he's called now,
Yeah.
they told him as well they liked the depth. You don't want to rush it. Now that situation was a little bit different. Eventually, he wasn't getting in, so eventually he had to make a move. But they from the summer they wanted to have depth on that back end. They're not going to have 8 top 4 guys. But if you have guys that can interchange in your third pair, maybe one guy's a little more mobile, maybe one guy's a little more physical, whatever it is, based on again, who you're playing, interchange those guys. It makes you that much deeper and stronger. And again, practice is different, obviously, but if you're getting regular practice routes and reps, and you're slotted in once a week kind of thing, at least you've got a bit of a rhythm that you can also mentally prepare for. Because as we know, this game is as mental as it is physical in certain spots. So if you can kind of, train yourself into knowing that, okay, I'm going to get into practice. I'm going to practice every day, but I'm going to get, let's say, a game a week. You can kind of deal with that accordingly and prep yourself when it's time to slot in.
How do you deploy the crease for the rest of the week? As you reference, relatively busy week for the Maple Leafs, considering the last 2, they've had, 2-game slates, but they got Nashville Wednesday, home to Washington Friday, then on the road in Pittsburgh against the Pens on Saturday. I think it's simple in my world. I go back to Woll Wednesday. I go Woll Wednesday and Saturday, and then go Stolars on Friday against Washington. What would you do?
Yeah, 100%. That's what I was going to say. Give Woll a potential confidence booster in playing Nashville. Now that could be a trap game overall. So you got to be careful. What we talked about, what you mentioned at the start with Chicago, where they normally don't play well against the crappier teams, that this could be a trap game for the Leafs on Wednesday. It's a great opportunity to collect 2 more points and give yourself a bit of a gap potentially over Florida in the division. But yeah, I go Woll on Wednesday. I give Stolars the tougher opponent in the Caps on Friday at home. And then I put Joe back in on Saturday in Pitt. Like that makes sense to me. And again, confidence booster as well. 2 back-to-back lesser opponents in Nashville and Pittsburgh for Joseph Woll to kind of, maintain a steady pace of play for him.
He's been on fire too. 5 consecutive victories for Joseph Woll, and quite frankly, I really don't care who plays in net for this team right now. Both guys are red hot. Great relationship, feeling good. The Leafs playing as a cohesive unit and riding high. Winners of 9 of 11 at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Again, Dave Pagnotta, the Fourth Period NHL Network, filling in for Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. So we got some info here in terms of negotiations, conversations when it comes to Matthew Knies, who now has 10 goals in 22 games. He's on a scoring pace of 37 goals. So the Leafs and Knies' camp have re-engaged in contract discussions recently. Nothing imminent, as we found out, but they're talking again, which is a development, right?
It is, because they kind of, the McCabe situation, when he signed his extension, it kind of developed relatively quickly. They hadn't really gotten hard into negotiations, and then it took like 3-4 days, and they banged out a deal. I'm not suggesting this is the case here, because it doesn't sound like it. But yeah, talks have resumed. And I mean, it's a smart play, especially from the Leafs side of things, to try to lock him in sooner rather than later. Because if he does hit 30 plus goals by the end of the season, it's going to be a little spicy meatball they're going to have to deal with. So, try to see if there's an avenue to work something out now. And then if there is, awesome, go from there. But I think this is, with players like him, you could go the bridge route, you could go long term. I think it's in Toronto's best interest to focus on long term, depending on what the dollars ultimately are going to be. But if you can lock this kid in for the next 6, 7, 8 years, and it's a manageable cap hit, and it'll probably be a higher cap hit in the first, or optically in years 1, maybe 2, and then it'll kind of even out. And you're going to go, all right, this is going to be a really good deal for the foreseeable future if he keeps up that level of performance. So good to see. Get the negotiations going. See where everybody's at. I still think this is probably something that gets done in the summer, unless both sides just say, look, let's be in the middle early. Let's just get this done and bang it out of the way. It's a different negotiation than I think McCabe's was, because of obviously the type of player, controllable, young. They hold a lot in their cart here in this discussion.
You know what would scare me shitless if it gets to the summer? I get what you're saying is the offer sheet, man. Like, especially the way this guy's playing. Who's to say that somebody doesn't come in and blow his brains off with a 7-year offer, 8.5 sheets a year, man? Like, I'm serious. Like, I think he's playing that good where people see that potential and are like, you know what, we'll give you anything you want at this point.
Well, the thing that Toronto has going for them in that respect, as of now, is they've got a shit ton of cap space.
Yeah,
with Mitch off and Tavares off and a few other guys, like they've got a lot of wiggle room. So teams that pinpoint guys for offer sheets are trying to see how they can basically use that leverage, because the team's limited with their cap situation. We're going to $92.5 million next season on the cap, unless they agree to kind of bridge whatever is going to develop afterwards with the new CBA. By 26 or next season will be 5-6. So that'll be, as of now, 92.5. And then 6-7, we're going to climb because of the new CBA to well over 100, probably going to be in the 105 range, maybe more. So I think if you mitigate that a little bit, increases, I know there's been talk of the cap, if they can increase it, I would guess that you're sitting at around 95 million next season on the salary cap. Between that increase plus the cap space, I wouldn't be too worried if I'm Toronto with respect to waiting until the summer to get Knies locked in. At the same time, I would rather I'd be more comfortable if he's locked in soon after the playoffs are done. Mm-hmm. Like that would be my number one piece of business, depending on where things fall for this team. If they go all the way, then understandable, different discussion. But if it's a shorter playoff, then you've got a little bit of a window to kind of lock that in. But I think Toronto's in a healthy position financially with respect to the cap and with respect to Knies. I wouldn't be worried about the offer sheet if I were them right now.
The one thing that's been consistent that I've been hearing is that it sounds like the Knies camp is more in favor of like a bridge deal, like 4 years or less. And I just wonder how the Leafs get to that conversation where they're open, the Knies camp, to taking 7 or an 8-year deal. Because that's I don't know if you're hearing the same thing, but that's been the consistent thing I've been hearing the last month and a half or so is that it's probably going to be 4 years or less. But if you're the Leafs, what's that number, Matthew Knies? What's that number look like if we want to give you an 8-year contract? Is the big question.
Yeah, and as I said, I think Toronto is I guess the preference would be to go long term. You're right. I've heard the same 3-4 years, kind of looking in that range on a shorter term deal for Knies. So not a typical traditional bridge, which is normally 2 years. But yeah, 3 or 4 years, you could go that direction because it will be a lower cap hit. But again, with the cap going up and everything, I don't think a lot of teams are overly concerned with their young stars in going the long term route. That being said, I understand the argument on Knies' side and his camp side, and I would probably push for that too. But from Toronto's side, yeah, you go long term. And if it is long term, right now you're probably in that 7.25 range. if he hits 30 plus, that number goes up. So it's a risk if you wait till the end of the season from the team side, because the better he performs, the better his numbers, the higher the price tag. And it's a risk from his side of things, because if he gets hurt or if he doesn't perform, and he has 26 goals or 24 or whatever, then that drops the price tag a little bit. And if it's from an injury side of things, then that factors into negotiations as well, because now you're just talking about hypotheticals and potential. And that's where things get a little bit dangerous and dicey, and that's where things tend to lead towards more short-term potentially. So not always the case. I think one example I could use is Slafkovsky. He got hurt in his first year. He missed a little bit of time last season with Montreal, had a good second half. They locked him into a long-term deal anyway. But I think from Knies' side of things, you may want to wait to see how you perform, unless the Leafs just kind of say, all right, we believe in this potential too. We don't need to dick around with negotiations. Let's just hammer this out.
Yeah, super curious where this goes, but I love this kid. I'm sure you do as well. I just love what he brings to the table. It's not just about the offense, just his style, his brand. I think is conducive to success in the playoffs, and I think he's got like that, physical, the leadership qualities. I think he's got the clutch factor. I mean, this is going to be an interesting negotiation moving forward. So on the debut edition of The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, make sure to go check that out over at the Daily Faceoff YouTube page and wherever you get your podcasts. Merrick floated the name Nazem Kadri, who we're all very, very familiar with now with the Calgary Flames, still has term and money remaining on his contract. But can we see, like, what's the potential of a reunion? Because obviously there's been names thrown out there the last little while. It's quite clear the Leafs are probably going to look to add up the middle, but I think Kadri's a really interesting name at this point in his career.
Yeah, and he was available in the summer around the draft. Calgary made him available. Now he's got a full no move, so obviously he's got a say in where he could potentially end up. But that was then. Now they're in the thick of things in the Pacific Division. I don't know how readily available Naz would be right now. My sense at the draft and around the draft in late June and early July afterwards was that he would be open to a return here. He'd be open to a return in Colorado, and if not here or the Avs, then somewhere close to here, close to home. So, and I don't think Detroit's in the mix, for this type of player. The only thing I look at with respect to Naz is that contract. $7 million cap hit isn't what scares me. It's the term that's left on it. Signed through, I think, 28, 29, something like that, or right around there. So I would look at that as a bit of a barrier, depending on price, because Calgary's not going to retain on that player for that amount of time. It's an interesting name. It's an interesting potential. I think a lot of what Calgary's going to end up doing, not just with Naz, but with Rasmus Andersson, and who's got another year on his deal from a defenseman. Kuzmenko is a UFA at the end of the season. They've got a few other guys they could potentially play with. I think they're just going to wait to see how their season unfolds. Is this going to be Philly from last year, where they exceeded expectations and then came back down to earth and then started to sell off? Or can they stay steady, and probably with Vancouver and Edmonton behind them, can they stay steady in a wild card spot this season? And that'll, I think, dictate what they're going to end up doing and what Craig Conroy does. But with respect to Naz, if I'm Toronto, I would look at it, but my hesitancy would be the amount of term left on that deal.
I agree with you. I think this is more a situation where it looks good on paper than actually making sense financially. He's got 4 years left, $28 million, a $7 million cap hit. Like, naturally, when I heard this story come out, and obviously, Merrick, as credentials as anybody in this industry, puts that out, it makes a lot of sense. Pretty much just speculating that, it would make a lot of sense for the Leafs to circle in on this type of name. How would it even fit trade-wise is my question, because the Leafs are so close to the cap. You got to trade guys out. I don't think the Flames are taking Yarncroke back. I don't even know where it would start with the conversation. How much heavy lifting the Leafs would have to do to even get this guy in the lineup,
Right. You're going to need some type of retention from somewhere. And because of the term, even if you're, and because of the term, you're probably paying a first-round pick, which the Leafs don't have this year. Can you push it to 27? Like, give yourself some breathing room. I don't know how interested a team would be. I just financially, I'm sure they could figure out a way. But again, it's term. That's the bigger issue for me is just how many more years are on that contract, because he's 34. Is with 4 or 5 years left on that deal is I mean, who knows? In 5 years, maybe a third line player, a third line center is making $7 million. But I think the fit is there in a sense that he would waive. My understanding, anyway, is he would waive to go back to Toronto, and I think maybe that's part of Jeff's reasoning as well, and because he was available in the summer. So I mean, obviously we'll see, but you're right. I mean, financially, cap wise, right now, it's going to take a lot of juggling, and if Yarncrook's done for the season, and I'm not suggesting he is, I'm just trying to think of different possibilities here. Yeah, it frees you 2.1 that you can go over the cap with, but you still have $5 million you got to clear. It's not easy to do. So I think Toronto would be better focused this year on going a rental route and going in a direction of, an expiring contract, and try to vulture in on some teams that are struggling.
Okay, so with that in mind, I tend to agree with you. I think it would make more sense to go the rental route. Who are some names that could make sense? And for me, like, the big thing when I'm trying to sift through possibilities for this Leafs team is like, okay, you want this guy. So who are you giving up? Is a Minton out there? Is a
Right.
Cowan out there? Is a Danford available? You just talked about it. They have no first this year. They have no fourth this year, no second or
Yeah.
fourth next year. Like, the capital isn't there prospect wise or draft pick wise. So how are you going to attain a guy like, for example, I would love to get Brock Nelson in the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a pending UFA. I think the Islanders will at least engage in that conversation, see if they can re-sign him. He'd be a really good fit on paper. I just don't know where you're giving up to get the guy,
Well, and that's exactly it. I mean, if the Islanders do go that route, and I agree with you, I think Brock Nelson, he would be number one on my target list for rentals. Throw him onto that second line. One of his best offensive seasons of his career was also one of the best of John Tavares' career when they were playing together on the island. Like, that would be, if I'm Brad Treliving, I'm targeting Brock Nelson hard. But if he keeps playing the way he's playing, and the guy scores 30 goals year after year, he's Mr. 30 reliable, it's a first-round pick plus. Are the Islanders willing to take a first-round pick next year? Is Toronto willing to trade a first-round pick next year and go back-to-back years without a first? And that's part of it. Like, they're not going to trade Minton. They've been very adamant about not wanting to trade Easton Cowan either. I can't imagine they would want to look at moving Danford. I think he would be more available than the other two, but it doesn't mean that they would, at least not for a rental, pull that off. But I mean, I would try to get as creative as possible. And it may have to be a scenario where you're dealing quantity and overpaying because of quantity, because you're also probably going to need the Islanders to retain on that contract. And the Isles have retention space, I think all 3 slots. So they could eat on it, which is not typical of what Lou Lamoriello would do, but under the circumstances, he may not have a choice later on in the season, whether it's Leafs or someone else. But like Brock Nelson, to me, if I'm Toronto, I'm keeping tabs on the Islanders and how they perform. And if he's available, I'm trying to go all in. Like, I would do almost everything I can. It may be a scenario where, like, this was like Tanev last year. Like, Tanev was number 1 on Tree's target list, and he lost out to Dallas, ended up winning him in free agency. Maybe that's something that we see happen with Brock, but I think that's a perfect fit for Toronto for a number of reasons. You slot him into the 2C, you get him to a player he's accustomed to have played with before in Tavares. Just the cost is going to be tricky.
Yeah, I agree. I just think he's a really good fit, but ultimately, to everything you just said, I just don't know how you would make it work, and that's why I think it's not going to be a sexy name. Like, I would be hesitant to say it's going to be a name that people know or are familiar with that is going to be brought in here. I think they're going to bring somebody in, but some names that you were sort of, speculating to me: Jake Evans, Ryan Donato, Yanni Gord's a guy we've talked about quite a bit. Brandon Tanev doesn't play up the middle, but obviously his brother's on this team. Like, I think they're going to add that type of player, but I'm just curious as to who it's going to be. You have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, other than Nelson, I think the guys you mentioned are players that they're going to target. And my understanding is, at least internally, they're starting to discuss options, which is what every team does around this time of year anyway. You start to pinpoint options. Doesn't mean you're necessarily reaching out just yet, We're going, all right, this is a guy that would fit. This is a guy that would fit. This is a guy we'd like, and so on. Like Brandon Tanev brings that physical energy. He's an energy player. He's a role energy player, but not your prototypical grinder, fourth line guy. He's an excellent add for a third line for a cup contender, and you could slot him on the wing. Jake Evans, you've mentioned him before as well. Like this is a great fourth line addition. Two-way, he's got a lot of speed. He's got playoff experience. But with Minton, like we just talked about, with the way Minton's performing, you don't necessarily have to go out now and get somebody for the bottom six in the middle. I think Toronto needs to look at a second line center, but where's the cost? And then you're evaluating cost versus opportunity cost. You're dealing with futures. Like it's going to be a tricky scenario. So I think you're right. At the end of the day, they might not go for the sexiest of names just because of the cards that they've dealt themselves. But that they're in a position financially and asset wise where they might not be able to capitalize on the primo guys. But I think other guys like Yanni Gourde's an interesting one because he's interchangeable between second and third line, depending on how you want to match up against whoever your opponent is. Great two-way guy. He's got cup pedigree, winning in Tampa, back to back. I think they've engaged or very loosely in contract extension talks in Seattle with Yanni Gourde. I don't know about Tanev just yet, but I believe with Gourde, they've at least got the ball rolling or at least started. They've got to evaluate their season too. Like it may be in their better interest to trade him and revisit a potential reunion in the summer so you can collect assets. Seattle, I think they thought they'd be in a better position, but this is what I talked about earlier. If you're a top contender and you've got an opportunity to kind of vulture in here and prize somebody away and convince a team to pluck somebody, I think that's another guy that you take a look at and you say, hey, maybe this is a fit. And then Donato, we saw last night, he had a couple chances, couple opportunities, but that's your third line center kind of guy, although he does have some finish to his game, and I think he's first or second on the team in Chicago in scoring, which may or may not say much because it's Chicago, but that's an option and a $2 million cap hit, I believe. So from the non-sexy names, he'd be somebody that would be on one of my lists.
Well, kudos to you for watching that game. I didn't notice anybody on Chicago. Never mind Connor Bedard. Never mind Ryan Donato. How about a guy like Frank Vatrano? I know a couple people in the chat were asking about Frank Vatrano over in Anaheim.
Yeah, winger more than anything. If you want to kind of stabilize things and provide extra scoring, you can kind of do that. Vatrano's an interesting one because he's night and day compared to how he performed last season. Like he's not had a good start to the season, and some of the veterans in Anaheim have not really kind of replicated what they did last year. Vatrano's one of them. Now he is a UFA. He's got a cap hit under $4 million. I think it's 3.6, something like that. So it's manageable depending on what you're putting out. And Anaheim, another team that is willing to retain. But again, retention equals higher costs. So you got to factor all of those things in. I think for Toronto, the focus in terms of big names or big piece would be the center position at the 2C. And if you can't fill that, then you'll look to see, all right, where can we add a little bit? He's got a tiny bit of jam to his game. He's not just pure offense. He's got a little physicality that he can bring too. But I almost look at it going, we've got so much offense. Do we want more or do we want more role physical players? And that's where I think a guy like Brandon Tanev, to me, I would prefer over a guy like Vatrano.
I think it's always so interesting when you talk about perennial cup contenders, which I don't know about you, but I view the Maple Leafs now as a perennial cup contender, what they looked at or what they look to do ahead of the trade deadline, because very seldom does a team who gets the hot, sexy name at the deadline, do they win the Stanley Cup? It's happened before, but it doesn't happen as frequently as people might think. Like I always like to bring up the name Arturi Lehkonen. The pickup for Colorado a couple of years ago from Montreal was like a Swiss Army knife. I thought he's been a great addition, still has been a good addition for that team. But that's what I'm trying to think about when I look at the Maple Leafs of potential additions. Like that type of guy who could play up and down your lineup and bring some versatility and some depth. Because, again, I just don't think the teams that pick up the players, like the Rangers a couple of years ago, stand out for me where it's like they pick up Patrick Kane, They got Tarasenko. On paper, they were like an all-star squad, but then they went to play the games and they had no chemistry whatsoever.
It's not about finding the best players, right? It's about finding the right players. Herb. So like you look at, you mentioned the one guy, and then you look at what Vegas did. They brought in Ivan Barbashev. He was a perfect guy for that top line because he brought that physicality to their unit, and he can finish. You look at what Tampa did in their years of winning when they brought in Barclay Goodrow, they brought in Blake Coleman. Those guys were fantastic for that team because they bring that edge that you need to compete. You don't need, like, Toronto's got a shit ton of skill. They don't need to add more skill, frankly. Like, you want the pressure cooker guys that are out there that you can add. Now, Brock Nelson has a little bit of edge to his game. And again, that's a bit of a different scenario. If you can fill that void, I think it's going to be a hell of a cost to pay. But if you could find a way, you do that. Otherwise, I look at the other pieces. Again, Tanev's a big one for me, but those caliber type of players, you look at to see who's available. Are they on expiring deals? What's the cost? And how do I add those kind of pieces to the mix? Those guys that have that extra jam to their game, so that you can spread things out and kind of spark your team a little bit. With all the skill that they've got, you need the other components for it. And that's also something Tree and Shanahan talked about in the offseason. You got a shit ton of skill. Now let's fill the other areas of this club, which they've done to a certain extent. I think they'd like to continue to do that. I think that would be the right path for them.
I think the most encouraging part, just to finish the thought on this, is that every night there seems to be consistency regardless of who's in the lineup, which is great to see. So finding that right piece or the right pieces to complement what they already have could set this team up for a success come the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. So normally what we do in this segment, we look at the slate, pick a game or winner that you like on the schedule. I'm going to look at the Columbus-Calgary game. I think it's going to be obviously an emotional night with the Gaudreau family in attendance. I'm going to play the Sean Monahan point in that game and the Monahan point prop. I'm going to be invested in watching in that game, and might look like to the under between the Blues and the Jets as well.
Patrick Laine is making his Canadiens debut tonight against the Islanders at home. I'm going to be watching that one. I got an anytime goal from Patrick Laine. I think he lights the lamp tonight in his official debut because he got some preseason games in. So I'm going with that one, and I'm taking the over in Florida, Pittsburgh. I think the Panthers are just going to destroy the Pens tonight. Yeah,
Pittsburgh has been a topic of conversation a couple times on this podcast. The Leafs got them on Saturday. Should be a very interesting one. Dave, excellent job today. You're going to be back on the Monday the 16th, the coast as well, right?
Yes, sir. If you'll have me, I'll jump in and get
Anything
back in the mix.
Anything else you want to promote before we wrap here?
No, not really. Not particularly.
TheFourthPeriod.com.
Yeah.
Join today.
Yeah, I mean, we're still doing all the fun stuff and all the insider stuff that we can there. And NHL Network and NHL Radio. If you care to listen to more of my crap, I'll be over there.
You better listen, damn it. Just some housekeeping notes before we wrap. So Zach Phillips is going to be in for tomorrow's edition. I'm off tomorrow. Jay Rosel's back in the mix. Rosie and I, as we talked about yesterday, interviewed Luke Shen early on Monday morning. We're going to play that interview for you tomorrow, so make sure you tune in. Check that one out. The boys are also going to tee up the game against the Predators. We talked about it earlier on. Should be a fascinating one. The Preds have had an up and down start, more so down. But again, Shenner coming back to the mix. Ryan O'Reilly as well. Stamkos now with the Nashville Predators. Should be a fun one at Scotiabank Arena on Wednesday night. Thanks so much for your time today, Dave.
You got it. Thanks, buddy.
There you have it. My pleasure. Dave Pagnotta, the Fourth Period in the NHL Network and NHL Network Radio. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You guys are great at the Leafs Nation 401. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to producer Vic as well. For Dave Pagnotta, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk tomorrow. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosa. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.